In this video, I'm going to discuss 3 different types of electric guitars that are worth owning, or at least trying, if you're into jazz. Hey everybody, Jamie Allroyd here helping you learn jazz guitar. Welcome to the channel. In this video, we're going to be discussing the 3 most commonly used electric guitars by jazz players. We're just talking electric guitar players here, no bronze strings, no nylon strings. That's an entirely different subject in my opinion. Just before I begin, I'd like to tell you about a free beginner jazz ebook, and if you're new to jazz and you want a structured guide, then please check out that link. Now, one important thing that I must disclose at the beginning of this lesson is that most of your tone and your sound comes from your fingers and the effort that you put in. There's about 10-20% at the very most that comes from the guitar, the amp. Everything else really just comes from your fingers. So buying a new guitar isn't necessarily going to solve all your problems, but if you're new to jazz, I think it's worth checking out different guitars because they can inspire you, and you tend to find that some players like certain guitars and sound better on, say, Archtops and never use solid bodies, or vice versa. You know, there's some players that only use solid bodies and are not Archtop guys. So I think it's worth checking out at least a few of these guitars just to see how they feel and what they do for you. To me, there's basically 3 types of different jazz guitar players. You get certain jazz guitar players such as, say, Barney Kessel and Ed Bickett, who really just use one guitar for the vast majority of their career. Barney Kessel obviously used that ES350. That's what's on a lot of his album covers, videos, and even early videos of him. There are a few exceptions. There's a few rare pictures and videos where he's borrowing a different guitar, but that pretty much was the guitar that he used. And as he said in an interview once, when he played that guitar, it felt like he had a pair of old comfortable slippers on. He just knew exactly how it played and it got the sounds that were in his head. The same can be said about Ed Bickett. Ed was mostly known for playing his trusty old Telecaster. I have seen one really old video of him in which he was playing an Archtop, but he then switched to Telecasters. Someone once asked him about using an Archtop and he said, "Why would I want to carry around one of those big heavy things?" Obviously, the tone that he gets from a Telecaster speaks for itself. The opposite to that is players that have actually changed guitars throughout their careers. Players such as Kenny Burrell, Pat Martino and George Benson are all examples of this. Pat Martino and George Benson have actually used Les Pauls in their career, and they were experimenting with different guitars until they got good endorsement deals really. George Benson with his Ibanez George Benson and Pat Martino with his Benedetto signature model. Let's begin by talking about the electric guitar that's most closely associated with jazz, the Archtop. Most of us want an Archtop as soon as we start playing jazz. Generally, we come from other backgrounds where we use solid body or acoustic guitars, and we seem to think that all our favourite players, Joe Pass, Wes, Charlie Christian, used an Archtop, and by playing an Archtop, we're instantly going to sound like them, which is not the case, but they do have a different sound from a solid body, and to some extent you can see why we all want one when we get into jazz. Archtops do feel and project very differently from a solid body. Obviously, an Archtop is an acoustic guitar when you've got no volume on, and an electric guitar once you've applied volume. The feel of an Archtop is very different from a solid body, and for me it makes me play slightly differently, so I'm glad that I've got one of each. I don't think that you need an Archtop to start playing. I think that you can get really good convincing jazz sounds from a solid body, and some people actually prefer the smaller guitars because they're much easier to play and practice with, but there's something about an Archtop that you can't get from a solid body. So even if you don't end up buying one, I think it's worth checking one out if you are interested in jazz. The thing that always makes me laugh is whenever I play gigs, if I use an Archtop, someone will always come up to me afterwards and say, "That guitar sounds really nice." But if I play a solid body, the compliment is usually, "You sound really nice." It's a strange visual aesthetic that people have. Any guitar with F-holes, and usually a guitar that sunbursts, seems to get compliments like that. It could be a SemiHollow Body guitar or an Archtop, but I rarely get compliments about the guitar itself if I'm playing a solid body. The next type of electric jazz guitar that I'm going to discuss is a semi-hollow body guitar. These come in all shapes of sizes, and I could really do a video discussing the differences between these because you're going to get an enormous difference in sound here. If you compare something like a Gibson ES330 to a 335, they're going to sound completely different. And of course, if you look at, say, something such as a slimline Gibson ES125 or a Guild X170, they're almost somewhere between a 335 and an Archtop. I'm not actually sure what you class some of these guitars as, so you've got a really different perspective of sounds here. Certainly if you're looking at something like a 335, that sounds more closely to a solid body in my opinion than an Archtop, but if you're looking at something like a slimline version of an ES125 or an X175, they sound more like Archtops. I think that a lot of modern players like semi-hollow body guitars because of players such as Kurt Rosenwinkel. I know that Kurt has played all kinds of guitars over the years, but in my opinion, 335 type guitars especially have great sustain, access to the higher frets, and they're really good at getting more of a modern sound. You can apply effects and pedals to them and they take those really well, whereas an Archtop has a little bit more problems when you're putting on overdrive and things like that. The last category of electric jazz guitars that I'm going to discuss is solid body guitars. This can mean a Telecaster, a Les Paul, a Strat, anything like that. The obvious advantage to these is that they are very light and portable. The Telecaster seems to be the most popular solid body choice among jazz guitar players. The obvious example is Ed Bickett, but more recent players like Julian Large and Bill Frisell occasionally play Telecasters as well. Players such as George Benson, Pat Martino and Clint Strong have all used Les Pauls and got an amazing jazz tone from a Les Paul, which is obviously a solid body guitar. If I could only own one type of electric guitar, it would be a very close call between a Telecaster and an Archtop. If I was only playing jazz, it might have to be an Archtop, but obviously if I had to play other things as well, then it would be the Telecaster. In an ideal world, I'd like to keep both. So that concludes my thoughts on electric jazz guitars, but what I'd really like to know is, what do you think about this? What do you think is the best electric guitar for jazz? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below.